start streaming. Okay, I am seeing... Oh, we failed to connect to Rumble. Rumble is not connecting for some reason. Why is Rumble not connecting?
Normally it's YouTube that doesn't connect.
I'm connected to YouTube and I'm connected to Odyssey. I'm getting an error from Rumble. Bear with me, everyone, so I can see why that might be. I'm going to try pasting in the stream key again to...
Maybe it's the UK, maybe it's the Online Safety Act taking effect. Yeah, that law that they just passed in the UK.
There we are on Rumble. Yay!
Yeah, that'll give us some good talking points of what's going on in the UK with the Online Safety Act.
Oh God, that's been brewing up a while. All right, and we're gonna see if anyone shows up in the chat. But yes, this is your very humble and very broke host. I've had an interesting month for those of you who have been following along. So, check engine light comes on in my car. I need 2 O2 sensors replaced. I get it back. Refrigerator breaks down. I only got that working today, and we have to wait until tomorrow to get food back in it. Then on Sunday, in the nice 102-degree Carolina weather, Heather and I go to Huntersville, come back out, car won't start. Ended up needing both a new starter and a new intake manifold. So yes, whatever karma I am paying off, I just paid off a huge chunk of it. And I am broke.
Yeah, who isn't broke these days?
Yeah, I know.
It's
is anyone in the
inflation.
chat? Is this actually going out on YouTube? It looks like it's fine.
Oh, Daniel joined us. Hi, haven't heard from him in a while.
Oh, hey, Daniel.
He's probably really going to want to talk about the online thing.
Oh, okay. I'm seeing it.
Someone called Vote
It's pulling up a bit rate error. My internet has been really floofy today.
Come on. Yeah, Shane, going back to what you were saying about your car, I still can't believe that happened because you stopped outside of a Five Guys and decided to get some lunch, and I jokingly said, well, hey, think of it this way, the repairs are going to be cheaper than your lunch, and it turns out, yeah, the tow truck was cheaper.
Well, the tow truck was only cheaper because I had AAA, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, no. Five Guys messed up my stomach last night.
Aw, Five Guys is so good. It is so good.
It's good, but it costs you an arm and a leg.
Oh, you were talking about the restaurant.
Funny thing. The tow truck driver, on the side of his tow truck, it had a sign on it that says, "We don't want an arm and a leg, just your toes." TOWS.
Yeah. Five Guys, they're good, but they're gonna cost you an arm, and a leg. And if you want them to deliver to your place, you're gonna have to put a second mortgage on your house.
It's been a long time. How you guys been?
Oh, it's great to hear from you, Daniel. Yeah, well, you heard how I've been. That's basically been my month.
I've been on the absolute fucking warpath with this.
Yeah, I figured you'd want to talk about that because I know you've been posting that a lot in the chat about the online safety thing that the UK passed.
And it looks like they're trying to get a kids online safety act here in the US.
Every time someone says
in the chat, so the chat is working.
Yeah, you've got gremlins in your Wi-Fi network. You know, I joked with my car mechanic. I wonder if my credit card company made a deal with the gremlins, because it seems like every time I'm about to finally pay my credit card off, something bad happens to me and I got to spend thousands of dollars on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got $30,000 in credit card debt.
It's like okay, I've only got $2,000 left. I should be able to pay it off after a couple more paychecks. What's this? Why won't my car start? Takes it to the mechanic. Oh yeah, you're gonna have to spend this, that, and this, that to fix the car, and it's gonna be $2,000.
Well, and it's like I got some funds that are doing really, really well, making some money on it. It's like, hey, I can pay my credit card off and then make some new improvements to the house, and then this happens.
Yep.
I think I've done a pretty darn good job reestablishing my savings after what happened to me back in 2006 that, of course, wiped me out. But it seems like every time I just start to get above water.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah, that was your car accident, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a year and a half of recovery and 5 rounds of surgery. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the Gremlins are like that, because I know you mentioned, like, that one time, your doctor finally got you on a painkiller regime, that finally said it's actually helping you manage your pain so you can get up, you can exercise and do more stuff. And then what happens? The US federal government declares war on opioids, so now the painkillers you get are either more expensive or they're trickier to get a hold of, and you can't take them as consistently.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, they are getting insane about it. There are people going in for like surgery and they're like, okay, we're a non-opioid clinic. We're just going to give you Tylenol. It's like, they're having surgery.
Yeah.
That's fucking malpractice. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And the worst part too is, like you said, is when you have like genuine permanent pain because of permanent nerve damage, and you say, and if you tell them, but doctor, I've got severe, I've got, this injury condition from an accident I had, so I will be in a permanent state of pain unless I take my opioids, and they go, well, then that means you need to go to rehab.
Yeah, and get on Suboxone. Why
Yeah.
Suboxone is so much better, I don't know, because it's actually an opioid, a really highly dependency forming one, and it's not full agonist. It doesn't do anything for pain.
Yeah.
Makes
not just
no
me
sense.
saying that, a lot of it's not just me saying that, a lot of doctors are complaining about it too, like they have patients that are screaming in pain, and it's genuine pain. It is not an addiction, and they have no risk of gaining addiction, but they can't prescribe them opioids without proper procedures, because if they do, they'll get arrested.
Yep, DEA will come in and shut them down.
Yep.
1 second.
It's one funny thing too, when South Park did that one episode about opioids and the Hummels, I think the thing that's so funny too is that one kid who's going after the opioids, he's not mad, that the people who were playing those mascots died. He's sad because he thinks the mascots died. I think it's because, like you said, the opioid epidemic happened because there were a couple of famous cases of people dying of an opioid overdose, and people were like, oh no, these famous celebrity dies, that means these opioids must be toxic.
Well,
it's like,
they
yeah,
are
but
if
that's
you get them on the black market. They're
Yeah.
not if you get the pharmaceutical formulation.
Yeah. And even if it is the pharmaceutical formulation, like, but it was pharmaceutical and he still died. And then it's like, yeah, but he also took half the bottle that one night and he downed it with whiskey.
Yep. It's the polypharmacology that gets you opioids and alcohol and whatever else you get.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen plenty of like YouTube skits like that too, where it's like I'm gonna sue you. The drugs you gave me destroyed my liver. Okay, what drugs did you take? This drugs. Well, I mean, okay, yeah, it can cause liver failure, but that's extremely rare. Are there other factors? And finally, you talk to them, and after interviewing, it's like, okay, are you taking them properly? Yeah, I take one pill every night after I've had my shot of whiskey. Wait, you take them with your whiskey?
Tylenol will cause liver failure on its own, though, if you take it long enough.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Tylenol, but yeah, a lot of... I mean, seriously, it's literally on the bottle. Do not take with alcohol.
And now gabapentin has been linked to dementia.
Yeah.
And that's something else they're trying to substitute. No, take gabapentin instead. It's completely safe. No, it isn't.
Actually, going back to alcohol and medicine, it actually reminds me of this story I read on Reddit. It was called Doctors of Reddit and whatnot, and one of them was a story about how they had a kid, that came in and he was actually about to get TMI. He was bleeding out of his butt and all that, and he was having severe diarrhea. And they're like, and the friends were like, listen, man, we didn't know it was gonna affect him that badly. And they're like, okay, what happened? And well, you see, well, you see, it's April Fool's and we wanted to pull a little joke on him, so we put laxatives in his drink. Okay, what drink did you put the laxatives in? And what was he drinking? Oh, he was having a Long Island iced tea.
Yep.
Yeah, and then sure enough, they found the laxatives that they used, and sure enough, what did it say on the label? Do not take with alcohol.
Fun with Facts says,
Yeah.
how do we get the U.S. to actually start shrinking the government for once? Stop asking. Stop
Yeah.
getting on your knees and demanding the slave owner to be nicer to you.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't work.
And to play the devil's advocate here, the sad reality is that some of the stuff that Trump said he wants to do, he kind of can't do because unfortunately, a lot of people like to hate on the president, but I think the most evil branch of all the three branches, like the most evil, I mean, they're all evil in their own right, but I think the most evil has to be Congress.
We can't forget the politicians in robes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's judges because they've been taking over all three branches, especially lately.
Oh, yeah.
At least there's finally some pushback on it. And what's been the response to the pushback? Oh, Trump's trying to take over all three branches. No, he's just trying to keep district judges in their place, which is in their district in the judicial branch.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's over. We'll soon need ID to use the internet. And we just had a major breach of all sorts of people's identities on a site where they made them upload their ID.
Yep.
And that wasn't the first, and it won't be the last. And yeah, they were stupid because they didn't secure it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too that I also gonna see, even if let's say there's some evidence that shows that demanding ID would keep children off of pornographic sites, what's going to protect people, from identity fraud? Because it's like, children aren't being exposed to pornography. Wait a minute, why are the cases of identity fraud and people going bankrupt because their money's being stolen skyrocketing?
And also, it's completely impossible and never happened that teenagers have gotten fake IDs to get into bars.
Oh, yeah.
And if they do much more of that, that'll be a cottage industry. Fake IDs will.
Oh, yeah. God damn it, how come every time us politicians try to pass a noble law, the black market has to come and circumvent it?
Do the math, guys.
It's like the dumbest gun control argument I've ever heard is that when you point out how people can easily get a hold of guns on the black market and all that, they're like, okay, so are you saying we should legalize murder because people are going to murder each other anyway, regardless if it's legal or not?
That is such that argument. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Makes me want to get a math violation all over
I mean, think of how many problems we could just nip in the bud if we made murder illegal.
Yes, then no one would ever be murdered ever again. And you wouldn't have murder for hire and crimes of passion.
Yeah, that's another thing too that I always find funny about when people say there ought to be a law, is that they treat laws as if there's some magical incantations, It reminds me of that one guy, that almost got in serious trouble because he was fed up with, lack of security at his school, and during a parent-teacher conference, he smuggled in a knife and he brought it out during the meeting. He didn't threaten anyone with it. He was just trying to show, look I just brought a deadly weapon into the school and your school failed to stop me. Why? How are you going to protect my kids? And all they could do was saying, you can't do that. It's against the law.
American citizens are in a submissive S&M relationship with our government. No, because at least in an S&M relationship, the dominant person actually cares about the pleasure and well-being of the sub. This is a battered spouse. That's the relationship.
There's a safety word,
I'm flattered to know you feel that way, Master.
Yeah, there's usually a safety word. If the American taxpayers say banana, the government doesn't go, oh, okay, I'll stop taxing you to death. Like an actual, dominant person would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
BDSM people are far, far, far more ethical than the government.
Yeah.
Everything they do is voluntary.
Yeah, if you get your information about BDSM from Grey's Anatomy, you need to actually do that.
I think you mean
Like
50
fun fact,
Shades
like
of Grey.
yeah. Fun fact: the biggest critics of not Grey's Anatomy, but 50 Shades of Grey. The biggest critics of that are the BDSM people, because a lot of BDSM people were saying we would never do that. That is a very toxic, abusive person. If you're, me and my wife are into that stuff, and she likes it when I, spank her and whip her and all that. But there's boundaries. We have safety words, and we're open with each other. If I'm going too far, she lets me know, and I stop.
It was basically Twilight fanfic written by someone with a rape fetish.
Yep. Which, by the way, that's an actual thing too. Believe it or not.
Yeah, but even that's not the way it's portrayed there. It's still, voluntary and has safe words and everything else.
Yeah, no joke. I like to go on Reddit and read like those really stories. Now, I don't know how true they are. But it's still a funny story nonetheless. But they were like, but there was a question where they've asked, sex workers of Reddit, what's your craziest request? And there actually was a guy, he was a male prostitute, and he said the strangest thing ever was that he was hired by a couple. They paid him $1,000. And they said, hey, me and my wife are into BDSM, and my wife has a little bit of a rope fetish. If we pay you $1,000, can you pretend to break into our home and have sex with her, and do it in a somewhat aggressive manner, like simulating it, basically? And she was in on it and all that, and he went through with it, and they had fun. But yeah, it was weird.
As long as everyone's a consenting adult.
Which reminds me of what I wrote down in the chat. I still find it so funny about how prostitution is illegal because having sex for money is degrading and a crime, but it's okay for people to have sex for money if another guy films them with intention to distribute.
Well, and that's the thing that they claim
kids,
that
she's not a whore
if
she's an actress.
Well, they claim that both of the people in the sex act are getting paid, and that's the difference. Whereas in prostitution, one of them's paying the other. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's goods and services either way, so.
Is it also no coincidence that a lot of these acts, that ban prostitution or crack down harder on child abusers are signed by politicians who are later discovered to have hired, underage prostitutes to sleep with them? Hint: Bill Clinton.
Oh, hey, Zen's on. Okay, now I know for sure I'm on Rumble.
Yeah.
That reminds me, did you guys hear that Hassan Piker's about to lose all his viewers?
Why is that?
They're banning anyone under 16 from Twitch and YouTube.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he's gonna lose all his stuff, Yeah, don't get me wrong. I hate TikTok as the next person. It's full of stupid and brain rot, but banning it—that's not a smart thing to do. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's
like going back to the Online Safety Act. They're like, you can get around that with a VPN, and they're like, well, then we'll ban VPNs. It's like, I don't think you get it.
People still don't realize there's no magic back door or key that would only work for the good guys. Even if we did trust these two people to be the fucking good guys.
Zen says, just because I hate cell phones doesn't mean I support banning them. And that's pretty much the libertarian thing. It's like, you defend gay marriage when you're not gay. You're against the war on drugs, even though you don't want to do drugs, etc. That's what it's all about. And if you don't get that, then I'm sorry, there's something wrong with you and you should probably get your head checked out. And I'm being serious.
I've also brought it up that the funny irony is that when we try to protect children, we ultimately end up hurting them. I think there's actually been studies that have shown that children that actually watch some of those quote-unquote educational stuff for children, it actually turns out to be worse than the stuff you're trying to protect them from.
Yep.
Yeah. Like Teletubbies. Oh.
Oh, God. or Barney.
Yep.
Let him watch SpongeBob. SpongeBob is good.
Or
Caillou. You had those weird ass. Sorry.
Or I was about to say, or Caillou. It's funny about Caillou because, you know, when it came out, you know, it was advertised as being a great show and it was going to be very educational for kids. And then the internet was full of people saying, yeah, my child watched Caillou and now every time he wants something and I tell him no, he throws a tantrum. Because that's literally what Caillou does in the show.
Yeah, I don't know that show.
It's about a toddler who throws a tantrum every time he doesn't get his way, and then he gets his way.
Wow. That's not a good message for kids.
Yeah, and he doesn't get disciplined at all, you know. Like, that's another problem, too, we're seeing, like, you know, like, I'm not saying we should go back to the old days and be like, oh, we need to go back to hitting our kids. We know that doesn't work, but, like, at the same time, you don't want to do the thing where it's like, oh, it's okay, honey. I know you're feeling emotional over this, because there's evidence that shows that if your kid's throwing a fit and you're down there and they're saying, oh, no, honey, I know you're upset and all that, you're not helping anymore, you know.
At this point, I think any parent who needs government or legislation to raise their kids so they don't have to needs to have their kids just forcibly put up for adoption.
Yeah, but then it will be government doing that, and
yep.
it'll just get worse.
And we all know how the government is when it comes to families, especially Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, that organization, it's like when they're not needed, they show up and they intervene, and when they are needed and there's actually children being in danger, they go, oh, well, nothing we can do.
Didn't Lachey used to work near the CPS?
I don't recall. He might have.
Yep.
But yeah, they'll just, like, on the word of someone, they'll go and yank the kids, and it's like, oh, we got word that you were neglecting your child because they were in their room all day and crying, so we're going to take them from you and put them in a foster home full of pedophiles where they'll be raped.
Yep. Or a super religious agnostic family that beats them because every time they display any sign of certainty.
Wait, super religious agnostic family. Are you sure about that combination?
It's a joke from South Park, you know, because there's that cliche. It's like we remove a family from a somewhat abusive family, and then they put them in like an uber religious family that beats them when they don't do the Bible. So they're like, well, why not? Let's make them agnostic. And the joke with that family, is that because they're diehard agnostics, if you show certainty to anything, they beat you up. Like if you think it's like, I saw an angel. No, you didn't. How could you know angels exist? Okay, I didn't see an angel. How could you know that? You could have saw one.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, your answer to everything has to be, I don't know, it's impossible to know. Which, to be fair, that's not a bad policy to take, but there does come a point where if you do have solid evidence, you can't just say, well, you know, at the very least, you should have the freedom to also say there's something going on, you know.
Well, I mean, it is true that you can't know anything for a fact with 100% certainty, and you can't rule anything out as an impossibility with 100% certainty, but there are some that are really, really close.
Yeah.
You sure about all that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. Saw what you did there. Didn't fall into the trap.
Damn it.
It's been too long since you've been on the stream. You're out of practice.
Yeah. I have been talking to my counselor, though. Shared some of her videos on the channel recently.
Some of which videos?
Some of my counselor's videos. She does YouTube content.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very interesting sort of libertarian-ish feminist.
Well, libertarians don't necessarily have an issue with the old school feminist theory. It's the modern feminists we have a problem with.
Yeah, the one that would get video games delisted from itch.
Yeah.
Or what was that other
Oh,
one?
yeah,
Valve or Steam?
we've
Or
been
what's
t-
the difference?
we've been
Valve is the company, Steam is the okay. You know what I mean.
we've been talking about that for the past few weeks and how stupid it is. So we're pretty much on the same page there.
Yeah, because the old school feminists just wanted the right to vote, and they wanted to liberate women and show that women could potentially, did have the same potential as men, but they still acknowledged, individualism, and that there was, some biological differences between men and women, which they acknowledge. That it's not like modern day feminists where they either are diehard Marxists that believe everyone is equal regardless, or they believe that women are victims that need special government protection.
I never know if the YouTube chat has frozen or if people have just stopped talking.
Actually, it reminds me of this one joke I saw about, and it was making fun of that one, and it was making fun of that one comment, SJW comment that said, everything is racist and sexist, and it's your job to point them out. And there was a guy that said, yeah, I was certain about that. I saw microaggressions everywhere, and I called everything out for racism. But you know what happened? I went to my doctor, and he gave me Valium, and now I no longer see racism everywhere.
Oh god, now I'm reminded of the Family Guy gag with LeVar Burton's visor.
But you get the joke, right?
This might have been before we went on, but we're talking about a sketch from In Living Color where they were making fun of the fact that the next generation couldn't have a black actor on without having stuff covering his face or a bunch of, clay prosthetics stuck all over it.
Yeah, Daniel, before we went online, I was ranting about Star Trek because I got into an argument with a person about Star Trek over Star Wars, and the Star Trek person insisted that Star Trek was 100% superior to Star Wars technology-wise.
I mean, one's a future setting, the other's more utopian, and I mean...
Yeah. Well, Star Trek is more of the economic bubble. Star Wars is after the bubble is burst. And everyone's trying to put the pieces of civilization back together.
Well, the thing I pointed out too that I was talking about with the Star Wars versus Star Trek is that Star Wars is a little bit more grounded in reality than people give it credit for, especially when it comes to socio-economic issues. And Star Trek can be just as fantastical and out of touch with reality as people accuse Star Wars of. I mean, and we brought this up, like a perfectly good example is their antimatter machines and their replicators. Yep.
And that was largely dependent on who was producer at the, if Rick Berman, Brandon Braga, Michael Piller, those people, after they went off to ruin Voyager, Next Gen and DS9 got a lot better.
Well, because at least nobody can ruin.
Then it was pretty much under the helm of Ira Stephen Bear and Ron Moore, both of whom said that if they had had their way, the replicator would never have been made a thing.
Look at the bright side. At least nobody can ruin Lower Decks.
It's already ruined. It started ruined.
I liked it better when it was called Red Dwarf.
Yeah. It was funnier too.
I mean, I saw a few episodes of Lower Decks, and there were a couple of jokes that did kind of make me chuckle, but yeah, everything else was just kind of eh.
Because
also Daniel,
with the producers I mentioned, too many of the producers today get the same idea that this is a socialist utopia where everything just works and everyone's just good. I mean, for crying out loud, Voyager, everyone was all getting along, and there weren't any interpersonal conflicts at all, even though half of those people were supposed to be Maquis terrorists.
Anyway, you were saying, Chris?
I was about to say, it's another thing I actually triggered a couple of Star Trek fans is when they were talking about, the philosophy and, and how so advanced, the science was in Star Trek. I pointed out, by this point, you guys are no better than Warhammer 40K fans. And they're like, why do you say that? Because literally Warhammer 40k is the exact same way. The only difference is that Warhammer 40k doesn't justify it. They say, yeah, our machines are indestructible, they're invulnerable, they have no weaknesses, our soldiers are invincible, and you know why? Because the God Emperor of Mankind says so.
No, I think they just tell stories on different scales, because Star Wars is more of a small scale, just a handful of worlds compared to Star Trek, and more of a breadth of the socioeconomic stratum of society, with, people, running their own ships and things like that. Whereas Star Trek, it's a much larger empire, and you're basically setting your show on the flagship of the entire
scale
Federation,
here
with the
really
most
depends on where
elite
you
crew
look.
in existence.
Scale here really depends on where you look. So,
and actually, a lot of people like to hate on him, because they say, "Oh, he got it all wrong" and all that. But Matt brought up a pretty good point that says, listen, the reason why the Federation on paper seems like a great place, to be in it if it's perfect. But when you really think about it, the overwhelming majority of all the shows and movies are from the Federation's point of view, and we don't necessarily see how the common people and everyone else view the Federation. And there's a really high probability that, to the people of the Enterprise, the Federation is the greatest thing ever created since sliced bread. But there might be a lot of people on Earth and in other places that are like, the Federation is the stupidest thing in the world, and I wish we tried something else, because they hate it.
Fun fact, that's not actually the right way to use the term greatest thing since sliced bread.
Well, you get the point, though,
Yeah.
And, and like, so many people are like, no, the Federation is not fascist, ignoring all the episodes where, yes, it did act in a fascistic manner. Yeah. I think the reason why so many Trekkies deny the Federation is fascist is because they use the pop definition of fascism, which is, well, fascism is about an evil military dictatorship. It's like, well, no, if you read Mussolini's book on fascism, there's more to it than that, and I'm sorry, if you actually read of it, the Federation does follow a lot of Mussolini's fascist principles. They have a powerful central government that dictates, how commerce is supposed to act with, so...
But again, that's mostly later producers doing that. If you look at the original series in isolation and forget about everything else, it is very different.
Yeah, you did mention that.
When you're into the first few seasons of the first few Star Trek movies, like the first 6, the original cast movies, they're still talking about like the money they earn and the pay they get and everything. And so, they just kind of misinterpreted Star Trek 4 when they were saying we don't use money, meaning we don't use the green pieces of paper they use in 1986. And then they took that and said, oh, it's a moneyless society. That wasn't what they were trying to do at all.
Yeah. Yeah, basically they have a credit system, basically.
That reminds me of the old joke of what socialists used before candles.
Yeah, light bulbs.
Yeah, well, then the credit system was really just because you had all of these different planets doing everything their own way, and the Federation never wanted to interfere with that, so you just got paid in credits, which was just a standard. Basically, the only thing you used credits for was to exchange with whatever local monetary system you were working with. That's really all that was.
Actually, that was one good thing too. That the Phantom Menace actually did brought up, even though it's a minor detail that most people won't recognize, is that it breaks that old trope that says, oh yeah, there's a universal galactic currency and everyone uses it because when they go on Naboo, the Queen, she's rich and she has a lot of money, but why can't she buy the new generator? Because they're on Tatooine, which is outside of the Republic control, and the Queen and all of the Queen's wealth and assets are mostly in Republic credits, and as Watto says, Republic credits are no good out here. Yeah.
Which actually there would be an exchange of some kind. Even if they weren't that much, you'd be able to exchange them for something.
Listen, I don't have anything else, but credits will be fine.
Yeah. No, they won't.
I
I
don't
think he was
have
doing a
anything
Jedi mind
else,
trick.
but
Yeah.
credits will be fine. No, Chris is going along with the bit.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, Daniel. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only money.
No, they won't. I'm a Targaryen. My tricks don't work on me. Only money.
Yeah. Until the Disney sequels came along and they said, oh yeah, the mind trick works on everybody. You just gotta try hard.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah. It's like no rape. If that stormtrooper
originally the mind trick was more like hypnotism. You couldn't really make someone do something that they really didn't want to do.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too is that the weak mind doesn't mean stupid. It just means it just because like here's a good thing. Bib Fortune, Jabba's right hand man. He fell for the Jedi mind trick, but if you read the expanded universe, he was not a stupid individual. The reason why was because he was a yes man and he was open to the Force. Same thing with that stormtrooper commander that Obi-Wan tricked. Oh, hang on, my mom's calling me.
Yeah, but I mean, you also couldn't mind trick someone to like, you will jump off a bridge and die or something like that.
You can do that in the right circumstances.
Maybe in the very right circumstances.
Because it used to be practiced in the Old Republic era.
Did it?
Yeah. It was something well within the capabilities of Revan and Mitra Surik in particular.
I mean, my understanding is they'd already have to be kind of suicidal to begin with in order for that to work.
Nah, it's a strength thing. It's a mental strength and fortitude thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I would imagine the less suicidal someone is, the more mental strength you need to use.
Also, Daniel, I was kind of about Star Wars versus Star Trek. I was kind of talking with Shane about this beforehand, but a lot of people who are Star Trek say that none of the ships in Star Wars could even touch the Enterprise because the Enterprise not only has overpowered shields, but it's also got strong armor, can shrug off. But I pointed out, yeah, except for the times where it didn't, because there have been episodes where it's like, yeah, it's established that the Enterprise, its shield, and hull are nearly indestructible and nothing can touch it. And then in other episodes and films, it gets glanced, by like, let's say like another energy source, and they're like, holy crap, Captain, the shields are down 60%. We can't take another hit.
Yeah, but usually that was to impress on you just how much energy that was.
It's basically a different manifestation of the warp
they're
effect.
As strong as the plot requires is what it is, but there was never this sense that they were weak and could be taken down by anything.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
Yeah, Daniel, that's another thing.
Energy was the scarcity. It is not a post-scarcity society. Energy was their scarcity. And if you actually thought through the economics of how it would actually work, that would be what Federation credits would be. They would be based on the joules or kilowatt hours or whatever. They'd be energy credits.
I will say this though, the biggest issue I also kind of have with the whole Star Wars versus Star Trek debate too is because a lot of people, when they had that whole debate about who would win in a space battle, a Star Destroyer or the Enterprise and all that, when you point out all the feats that the Star Destroyers can do, they go, well, we don't see that in the film, so therefore it doesn't happen. And I'm sorry,
what we do see in the films, it probably wouldn't be much of a fight. At least not with a destroyer class or higher starship.
Well, I mean, see, here's
Reliant
the thing.
Might not be able to do it, but if any Constitution class or certainly Dreadnought class would be able to do it.
Well, because here's the thing that people fail to realize is that Star Destroyers are a lot more tough and powerful than they realize, and it's like, well, then how come the Rebel Alliance, destroyed them with ease? They didn't. They took heavy casualties, and they were barely able to scratch the Star Destroyer.
Yeah, they didn't have any matter. Toughest
Well, that's
material
another.
is not going to stand up to antimatter. That's how it works.
And again, that's why I say by this point you're going into Warhammer 40k territory, because you might as well just saying our ships are better and superior because we have this, and that's final.
Well, no, that's in the lore. They're based on antimatter. Antimatter, just basic physics. Antimatter always annihilates an equal amount of matter.
By that point, all orc technology wins by default.
Why is that?
Because orc technology does whatever orcs think it can do.
Yeah, but are orcs smart enough to think of antimatter?
But that's just it. They don't know what antimatter is. Therefore, it can't affect it because their technology sees it, and and the antimatter goes, no, you can't do it. We'll destroy it. What's antimatter? Get out of our way.
That's basically how orc technology works in Warhammer 40k.
Also, here's another thing. Now, granted, this is from the expanded universe. So a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't count then. But you know how powerful some of those Star Destroyer super lasers are? I looked it up. When they're set to maximum firepower, a Star Destroyer super laser is the equivalent of has the equivalent of about 40 teratons of TNT. And for those that don't know,
I have no way of picturing how much that would be.
That is I don't know the precise number, but that's like several times more powerful. That's like several thousand times more powerful than Tsar Bomba. Like think of it this way. In Star Wars, the Galactic Empire, even though they built the Death Star, a standard Star Destroyer is actually capable of destroying a planet. There's a thing called the Base Delta Zero, and if that's authorized, basically what a Star Destroyer will do is that it'll set the turbolators to maximum firepower, and it will literally fire on all the major cities and population centers of the planet. And literally 1 or 2 shots is more than enough to destroy the city and create permanent environmental damage in that area.
Okay, what size asteroid could it take apart? Because that's really the only way we have to compare things like that from Star Trek to Star Wars. How big an asteroid could you clear out of your way with it?
In Empire Strikes Back, there's a scene where the Executor class and a regular Star Destroyer are shooting away asteroids that are in their way, and some of those asteroids were pretty big, and they were pelting them with one shot.
They were not that big. They were basically large meteors. They weren't like several kilometers wide.
And see, Shane, that is where you fail, because once again, you're taking the whole. It either happened on film or it didn't happen at all, because in the original books and the comics,
that was the example you came up with. You got a better example? Come up with a better example. I'm just going with your examples.
I've been out of the game for so long that I divorced myself from Star Wars for a long time.
Let me type this in for people.
I went way into Philip Jose Farmer.
Tsar Bomba, Russian.
Yep.
It was like a 50 megaton.
Yep.
A nuclear warhead that was so powerful, they were actually worried if the plane would be able to fly fast enough to get away from the shockwave of it. Tsar Bomba, basically think of it as being king of the bombs. That's basically what it means.
That's what its name was, yeah.
Did you know that all cargo is actually made out of the same substance?
All cargo is made out of the same substance?
Yeah, gasoline.
Oh, cargo. Yeah, Tsar Bomba was a Russian nuclear bomb There was a 50 megaton nuclear bomb. And they at least had plans for a 100 megaton bomb. And they blew up the 50 megaton bomb to try it and figured out that the whole idea was ridiculous. The whole Cold War, I can make bigger bombs than you, had just gone to such cartoonish proportions.
Having it say repost on X feels so weird.
Instead of retweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Finding Zen is recommending a video, Capitalism is Driven by Mental Illness. I'll definitely have to check that one out. Let's see, what else is going on? I know there have been plenty of things we can talk about. For some reason, that video of mine lying about slavery, I don't know if it got shared at the wrong place or something like that, but it has been raided just by a bunch of historical revisionists, who of course say we're the revisionists, because
What are you talking about? No one's ever said we're the revisionists.
sure, let's go with that. We were always at war with East Asia.
God, I've basically been comparing like why a lot of people like Alyssa Mercanti and like the Kotaku people, Kotaku and Polygon, have suddenly seemed to be on our side.
Am I coming through all right? I'm getting a lot of dropped frames. Everyone seeing me? I'm going to stop the webcam to be sure. Let's see what happens now. I don't know if my connection's flaking out or what. The internet has been iffy all day.
Yeah, sorry, I've been quiet, Shane. I've been looking up some of the stats of the Star Destroyers and all that.
I'm still dropping
so
frames. I don't know why.
Oh, wow. Okay, so according to this article I was reading, an Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer, its super heavy turbo laser that some of them, when they're set to maximum firepower, their most powerful super cannon, when it's set to maximum firepower, is 170 teratons per shot. Now, for an Earth estimation, the asteroid that hit the Earth and caused the KT extinction event, its explosion outcome was 72 teratons.
The problem is that doesn't really give us a basis for comparison with Star Trek, because they don't do that with the photon torpedoes. I know they destroyed some pretty massive stuff with those. And we've seen plenty of things that phasers on low power can do. But that's why I was thinking asteroid clearing, because that probably gets us the best basis for comparison.
And they also have a maximum firepower range of their maximum effective range, and that's just their effective range can be about I mean, they're lower. The standard laser cannons have a effective range of 100 kilometers, while the super heavy turbo lasers have an effective range of at least 400,000 kilometers.
So 400 megameters, that's actually not that much in space terms.
I don't know. Like I said, I go by what the diagrams say, not what the films say, because, like I said, films and TV shows, they're more often gonna exaggerate or nerf their story's technology or characters, because if they were consistent and had that, the fight would be over.
Well, the problem is Star Trek has the exact opposite problem. You look at all of the books that have the specifications published and everything, and they contradict each other all over the place, and they contradict a lot of the episodes. And
that's why Star Wars used to have superiority.
Yeah,
And I'm going to say
Star Wars used to do a really good job with the expanded universe to try and make it.
Yeah.
And then people started gaslighting the readers, saying, "Oh, it was never canon. It never connected. It never had any continuity until Disney took over."
And here's another thing I will say this, and someone actually brought this up too, and all that, and that actually the fact that the Enterprise is so powerful is actually a contradiction of itself. And people are like, well, why is that? It's like, okay, you have a ship that has nearly indestructible shields, and it can blow up small moons. And its phaser cannons can blow up small moons at medium power. I thought the Federation was supposed to be peaceful.
That's no moon.
Yeah, like he's like, okay, yeah, the super powerful shields, I understand. Why does it need a phaser? Why does it need a phaser cannon that can blow up a planet in one shot? That's not an ambassador of peace. That's basically saying, oh yeah, we're peaceful, and if you disagree with us, we'll blow up your planet.
There's nothing that says they have to use it on an inhabited planet. That is the kind of thing you'd want to do if you'd want to basically terraform planets in a system, destroy some of the planets and create explosions to maneuver other planets into the Goldilocks zone so that you can have a planet capable of sustaining life.
I just don't buy it.
Because remember, they actually had the technology to make the Genesis web. And that beats any weapon, planet-sized weapon you could do, really. Because it's going to rewrite in a short amount of time the entire chemistry of your planet. And
again, I know this is more fantastical elements, but there's another thing too that the Star Wars galaxy has that I still think would be it, is that they have the Force too. And people feel there is, well, what can the Force do? It's like, well, in the original expanded universe, you know how powerful the Force is? Luke Skywalker once used the Force to keep a supermassive black hole at bay. He couldn't stop it, but he could hold it at bay.
How do you mean hold it
Yeah,
at
but
bay?
which
Hold
bay?
it from what?
I think I can't remember. It was from like.
He slowed it from
mean
expanding.
Cancel its gravity so things won't fall in?
Yeah, what Daniel said. I think he was trying to save a ship that got caught in its pull, and he saved it from expanding, allowing the ship time to escape.
Wouldn't it have been a lot more efficient to just levitate the ship away from the black hole, as opposed to trying to stop the entire black hole from? So the black hole was expanding. It must have been eating a lot of matter.
Yeah.
Which means it would have had to, no, just levitate the ship out of the way. This is the dumb thing. It is so dumb. Why can't Jedi fly? I'm sorry. I have a big problem there.
Well, they actually can, but the reason why they don't do it is because the Force does require concentration, and if you were to levitate, you require actual it would require absolute confrontation. And yeah, you can fly like if it's peaceful and you're just doing that, but if you're in like a fight, it's not as easy, But we do see the Jedi levitate quite a few times, especially in the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, it's more of a mental effort than
there've been times they've been, falling from like a great height, and it's like they keep going through all of these machinations trying to save themselves before they hit. It's like, just levitate yourself so you don't hit the ground as hard. Give yourself a soft landing. That's
slow fall is an established technique, so.
And here's another thing. And here's another thing too. Like with slow fall, if you're talking about like, let's say the fight with Obi-Wan versus Jango Fett even if he used slow fall, Obi-Wan would have fallen into the ocean. Like Daniel just said, the Force requires concentration. It's not like, a Kryptonian thing where it's like, yeah, all you got to do is jump off a building and think about it and automatically you can fly. It requires absolute concentration. Because,
we see casual uses of the Force all the time, so I'm not sure I buy that.
Well, the casual use, for things like, making a door open, yeah, that's easy. That's easy to do, one thing I will say is that contrary to what Yoda said when he said size matters not, there actually is some truth to that because, yeah, it does require concentration on bigger objects, but yeah, it's concentration. And you got to remember is that the Jedi that are doing all the tricks all the time, most of them are Master Jedi, meaning they've been a Jedi for years and they know the Force at hand. And going back to where you were saying about levitating the ship, yeah, actually, honestly, if the Enterprise were to come across a Jedi could easily destroy the Enterprise easily. It happened in a game, not the films, but in the video game But in the video game, I think it was Force Unleashed, Jedi Star Killer, Darth Vader's secret apprentice, he once brought down an Imperial class Star Destroyer only using the Force. I think Yoda also destroyed a Confederate ship like that too.
I will say you can't trust the CGI, the Filoni Clone Wars, because it's canonically, like, even if you take Filoni seriously, it's canonically in-universe propaganda, so.
I mean, yeah, in theory, a Jedi could absolutely destroy the Death Star just by raising his hand and levitating it. But like we said, that takes years, if not decades, of study of the Force, and it requires absolute concentration. Luke didn't have that.
Okay, but that wasn't true of Darth Vader. So by your logic, Darth Vader would have been able to make him toast easy, instead of just trying to follow them in a freighter and then get blasted off in some random direction. Because he was no lightweight at the Force. He was supposed to be, the best of his generation at the Force. Anakin was. It's the same thing. Star Trek or Star Wars, it's as powerful as it needs to be at the time. It's as difficult as it needs to be at the time. It's all based on plot.
But again, I'll still make the credit that at least Star Wars is honest. Like, it acknowledges that it's primarily a space fantasy. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that Star Trek, advertises itself. It's like, oh yeah, we're a civilization that tries to stay as loyal to science as possible. And then they do stuff like say, oh yeah, we have this powerful technological element that does this and that. And it completely destroys the laws of physics and like conservation of matter and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And when you point that out, they're like, well, we've advanced to the point where are we talking about, the Old Republic, the Ruusan Reformation Republic, the OT trilogy? Because there are two eras in Star Wars that, in my personal opinion, I think think Star Trek would stand absolutely no chance against, and one was the Legacy era, which occurred 130 years after the events of the OT, and the other one is, and this is an actual thing, and this took place tens of thousands of years within the lore before the Clone Wars, the Rakatan Infinite Empire. Because the Infinite Empire was ruled by a species.
If you're going to talk about an economic heyday, sure, because that's exactly what Star Trek is in. It's in an economic heyday.
I'm talking about technological superiority is because because the Infinite Empire was ruled by an alien species called the Rakatan, and their technology was all force ability, like all that stuff that you were saying. Well, why couldn't they do this and that? From what I understand, the Rakatan could do that, plus more, and they had some pretty powerful technology. And what caused their empire to fall wasn't they were overthrown. It was they contracted some sort of disease that destroyed their connection to the Force, so they couldn't use their technology anymore. Because on the very rare occasion, because it's happened a handful of times within the expanded universe, when the people of the Star Wars galaxy were able to successfully reactivate a Rakatan technology or reverse engineer it, it kicked the ass of whatever they had.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, or even absent that, I could see if you just take, what we see in the movies forward a couple of 100 years where we've got a good economy going again, and you've also got the bigger need for scale. You're doing space exploration over a much larger scale, the way Star Trek does, where you need, these massive warp engines just so you can get there in a reasonable amount of time.
That was actually kind of
driving your power needs, and that's what's driving your technology, and that's what's driving your society. Then, yeah, they could absolutely rap. But I think when people are talking about it, they're talking about what's actually depicted in the TV shows and movies.
It's kind of a big thing in the Old Republic era, actually. The hyperspace wars that kind of came after the development of the first hyperdrive, because before then you kind of had to do sublight speeds. And hyperspace kind of works, you have to have it already mapped out so that you don't come back into real space in the middle of like a star or something.
That sounds more like Babylon 5, how that works.
Yeah. By the way, Daniel, when I have that when so many people say, Warhammer 40K is superior to both Star Trek and Star Wars, and the Empire of Man and 40K can easily crush, the Federation or the Empire, I have to point this out, though, that they never seem to want to acknowledge. Star Wars and Star Trek have a much more reliable, faster-than-light travel system. Because in the Warhammer 40K universe, you have to go through hell to get to one side of the galaxy or the other, and there is so much bad stuff that can happen when you do that. You can be attacked by a demon, you could get lost, or worse, and apparently this does happen on a regular basis. Yeah, you'll end up, at the location you're trying to get to, but it'll be 10,000 years in the future, so you might be sent to reinforce an army, but by the time you reach there, like 100 years have passed and that army's been defeated.
Yeah, relativistic time distortion can be a bitch.
Yeah. It would be a little difficult for the Empire of Man to fight the Galactic Empire if the Galactic Empire can get to planet, set up, a base on the necessary logistics, and by the time you get there, 10 years have passed, and the Empire already has a massive garrison on there.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really, in the films at least, get to get into too many details about how the faster than light travel was. But they keep saying light speed, but obviously it's not, because that would have taken years. It's faster than that, but they didn't really get into how it works. Whereas in Star Trek, you've got a fairly consistent, the original warp drive, and then the transwarp factor works on a different factor. But they're fairly consistent, at least.
I don't remember a lot about it, but there are rules for how hyperspace works versus real space.
Also, by the way, Shane, and this kind of does go back of how Star Trek is guilty of being inconsistent at times. Like, a common argument that people say is that, well, the Enterprise could run circles around the Star Destroyer, it could run into warp speed, run around circles, and then use its phaser to destroy the command deck. And From what I understand, while they could theoretically do that in like the next generation, if we're talking about the original one from the 1960s, if I recall correctly, they couldn't use their phaser cannon when they were in warp drive. Hence the reason why they had photon torpedoes, because they could be used in warp, but the phaser couldn't.
Yeah, but photon torpedoes are more powerful than phasers. Phasers are usually preferred because you can just keep firing them. Photon torpedoes are actual physical things you have to load and fire, and you've only got so many of them. But they're like really friggin' powerful. And if you are talking next gen, just pull the Picard maneuver on them. Give them a warp ghost or two, and then they won't know what ship to fire at.
This comment's actually aimed more at Daniel than it is, but so many people were discussing who would win in a space fight: Jean-Luc Picard versus Grand Admiral Thrawn in the original Legends from the Thrawn trilogy. It's one thing nobody wants to take into account, and this is something they're always saying, well, the Enterprise can do this because it's better than the Chimera, which was Thrawn's flagship, but there's one itty-bitty little detail they're leaving out. And this is one reason why I think Thrawn would ultimately end up winning, is here's the thing. Jean-Luc Picard, with the exception of some movies, he's only in command of one ship at a time. Thrawn has a fleet.
I don't really know much about Picard's tactical brains. So.
There were a few episodes where he commanded more than one ship at a time. There was one where he needed Data to go to take command of another ship, and then he basically split up his bridge crew into different ships and commanded them all. It was the one where they revealed that Selah was Tasha's daughter.
Yeah.
And they had to set up that trap to stop the Romulans from getting cloaked ships into Klingon space.
Yeah, but if you see the ships that Picard was going to have to, because that's another thing too when it comes to the whole. That's another thing too. Also, when it comes to the whole debate, about which franchise's universe is better, because it's like, because here's the thing: if you're talking about one-on-one, with a star destroyer, yeah, I could see the argument that the Enterprise could take out a star destroyer one-on-one. But the problem is that if the Federation is going to fight the Galactic Empire, they're going to fight the entirety of the Galactic Empire. And the Galactic Empire has 25,000 Star Destroyers alone, and that's not counting other ships they have that, actually, in my honest opinion, could actually counter some of the techniques that the Enterprise have. They have a ship called the Immobilizer, which fires gravity well projectiles that can prevent starships from entering hyperspace or warp drive. They have jammers, which can jam missiles from locking on. They've got smaller, faster ships that can fire long-range missiles. There's just so much. Like, just look up Empire at War. There's so much technology that both the Rebel Alliance and the Empire had.
The deciding factor for me was always that Trek relied too much on the multiverse.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too, and this is going back to the whole Thrawn versus Admiral Picard.
You don't really have a multiverse in Trek, though, until you got little things like the Mirror Universe, but they don't really rely on anything until the movie reboot.
I mean, anything outside of the core shows and the pre-reboot movies too. So.
And again, Chris, I think you're just not getting the difference in scale, because if you're going to try to overwhelm Starfleet with numbers, remember the Federation covers something like a quarter of the galaxy. And that's how many star systems? How many billions of star systems? We don't know how many Federation ships there are, but there's a lot. Considering that they got their asses handed to them by the Borg, that blew through everything they have to get straight to Earth, and they had the fleet back up and running in less than a year. That's the scale we're talking about here. I don't think you're going to be able to overwhelm them with numbers. And especially, when they're allied with, when they're allied with the Klingons, who have cloaking technology and who are a warrior race that have an empire of their own. And if they can manage to get an alliance with the Romulans, because the Romulans will be threatened by that too. Romulans invented cloaking technology.
Really? I never saw that.
That ship that you didn't see going through the sky last night, that was a Romulan ship. I know, you're just operating on two completely different scales. I mean, that's why Star Trek basically needs unobtainium as fuel. The antimatter power generation, because you got to get these big starships across the galaxy in some kind of reasonable amount of time.
Sorry, I'm just looking up how big the Star Wars galaxy is, because the Galactic Empire did control it. It pretty much controlled like almost all the known galaxy.
Well, at least as far out as maybe the Outer Rim or Wild Space.
Yeah.
And also, how big is that galaxy far, far away? Galaxies come in all sorts of sizes,
Okay, so from what I understand, we can presume the Star Trek universe takes place in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Galaxy is estimated to be roughly around 100,000 light years across. According to Wikipedia, the Star Wars galaxy is slightly bigger than that at 120,000 light years across.
But how much of that does the Empire take up?
Yeah, we're not really accounting for the we have to adjust for the unknown regions.
Well, the Empire does have a presence in the unknown regions. The unknown regions means nobody knows what's out there. It just means it hasn't been properly explored. And in the original expanded universe, the Empire did have a presence in the expanded universe. It was called the Empire of the Hand, and its job was to basically figure out a way to expand the Empire outside of the galaxy, but also to act as a defense, because Palpatine knew that the Yuzon Vong were coming. By the way, that was another stupid debate I saw one time. It was the whole who would win in a galactic war, the Yuzon Vong or the Borg, and everyone said, oh, it's the Borg. They would assimilate the Yuzon Vong and smash right through their galaxy. There's just one itty bitty little problem. The Yuzon Vong do not use artificial technology like metal. They use biotechnology like biopunk, and it's established. I know this too. It is established the Borg cannot assimilate stuff like that, because there's an alien species called Species 8472, I think, and it uses biotechnology, and the Borg couldn't assimilate them. Also, if I recall correctly, contrary to what some people think, the Borg can't just touch you and they go, you will be assimilated, and you're automatically assimilated. Like, it still takes time,
I remember an even stupider claim I heard that the Vong were a ripoff of the Daleks.
According to Wikipedia, the Star Wars galaxy is 3.2 billion systems orbiting a supermassive black hole.
Are you counting the canon article or the Legends article?
I'm looking at Wikipedia.
The canon article or the Legends article?
This is canon, yeah, okay, yeah.
Look at the Legends article. That's what we're using as our...
Go to Legends. Yeah. I was just saying about the canon article, that's nothing. That's not even a quadrant. That's not even a sector. Okay, here we are. Now the galaxy here is 180 billion systems. 120,000 light years across. So slightly bigger and almost twice as many systems. But how much of that is the Empire?
At least as far out as the Outer Rim and a decent chunk of Wild Space and some of the unknown regions.
And how far into the galaxy?
Well, as far in as the core in Coruscant. 000.
Well, no, because even this one is saying there's a supermassive black hole at the center. So Coruscant couldn't be at the center. Otherwise, it would have a supermassive black hole to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's more of a
Only
nav
probe
computer.
droids had ever visited the black hole at the galactic center. Yes.
Yeah, I think the
Coruscant
000
would be the
coordinate.
center of the Empire, not the center of the galaxy.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's what they say when they say Coruscant's the center, you know.
It's technically began as the origin of the humans' ancestors, the Zell.
And the funny irony too, that pisses off a lot of people from Coruscant because the Coruscantians have a reputation of being rather smug. Is that Coruscant's not even the planet closest to the supermassive black hole in the Star Wars galaxy. The closest known planet was a planet called Biss, and the closest object that we know to the black hole was a thing called Centerpoint Station, which was an Imperial outpost.
Well, Centerpoint
down towards the bottom of the Legends article, there were 7.1 billion truly habitable stars within the galaxy and about 3.2 billion habitable star systems. It was estimated that about 1 billion of those systems were actually populated or had been settled by sentient beings. So that's a tiny amount. That's not just the Empire, that's everything.
Also, Centerpoint was later inhabited and settled by the Empire. It was originally constructed by the Celestials.
Oh no, I got it wrong. Centerpoint Station wasn't near the Galactic. That's in the Maw. My bad.
I was about to say Centerpoint is in the Carillion system.
No, it's in the Maw cluster.
No, Centerpoint is in the Carillion system between Talos and Tralos. Oh. That's why it's called Centerpoint Station.
Oh.
Because it's in the center it's at the center point between the two twin worlds of the system.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, Shane, you should really get into, you know, the expanded universe because there's a lot of interesting stuff. Fun fact: Star Wars in the original expanded universe, it even has their equivalent of Q. She's called Abeloth. Actually, Abeloth is a lot more sinister than Q because if I recall correctly, Q is just, you know, he's just a celestial being of chaos. He just does stuff like that because it amuses him.
Q was basically a jester.
Yeah, Abeloth was actually, you know, not only did she have some pretty powerful abilities, she literally, you know, she was a malevolent being.
Q always reminds me of a My Little Pony villain.
Q wasn't really a villain. He was an antagonist, but he wasn't really a villain.
No, I think Chris would get the joke I was going for.
I'm looking at the core worlds section, but it doesn't say how many worlds those are. But that's the developed region of the galaxy is the core worlds.
Again, make sure you're on the Legends article, not the.
I am on the Legends article, yeah.
And going back to the Borg, though, I was talking with some people about the Death Star versus the Borg, and and going back to what you said about economics of scale is like, here's the thing I will give Star Trek credit for. If it was multiple Borg vessels, yeah, the Death Star wouldn't stand a chance. But if it was one-on-one, Death Star, because the Death Star would vaporize it before the Borg had a chance to properly scan it. Now, yeah, if there were multiple ones, then yeah, the Borg...
That's assuming they would need to realize it because the Death Star systems were still fired manually under orders. And a Borg cube can be on you before you know it. I don't know. I'd give them 50-50. It's all about who gets off the first shot.
Yeah.
Well, then it goes to Han.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie though, Shane.
Manning the Death Star.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie
but
though,
he
Shane.
shot first.
I'm not gonna lie though, Shane. Like the more I learn about Star Trek and the expanded universe and what they can do, the thing in the back of my head is always gonna be, wow, no wonder the concept of the Mary Sue came from the Star Trek community.
Was it? I thought it was Star Trek fanfic that started that.
Well,
Yeah,
it was, but
let's
it's
start.
still, yeah, no wonder it came from the Star Trek.
fandom. So
Yeah, it was basically a woman who wrote Star Trek fanfic so she could put herself in and sleep with all the characters, basically.
wasn't it a parody of that concept, like an intentional parody?
I don't know.
Though I will say, one of the funniest science debates I ever saw about the Borg involved what if the Borg, went after the dialects, and I said the dialects hands down. It's like, well, wouldn't the Borg assimilate dialect technology? It's like, haven't you ever watched Doctor Who? Here's what would happen: the Borg would go, we are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile, and they do that thing only to discover they can't utilize dialect technology. And the dialect replied, "My technology is not assimilated."
The Borg and the Cybermen seems like a more interesting conflict.
I think the Borg and the Cybermen would merge because they basically got the same concepts.
Oh, yeah.
The Borg are basically a ripoff of the Cybermen, let's face it.
Yeah.
Star Trek as a whole is basically a ripoff of Forbidden Planet.
Actually, the original series they had said was more based off of those World War II era submarine films.
Huh.
Because in space you've got the large scales mean that you're kind of slow moving, more like a sub relative to other submarines out there, and you can move in 3 dimensions and things like that.
And here I was thinking it was more of a ripoff than a discount circumcision.
It's one thing. I mean, granted, it could be because of my arrogance, but I still don't see a popular reason that when so many people talk about the whole they can beam down to planets. Well, wouldn't that kill the person because you're literally breaking apart their molecules? That would kill them.
Transporter problem.
But they basically settled that because that was always the debate is, are you transporting someone or are you making a copy and murdering the original? Thomas Riker, his existence is pretty much proof that you're making a double and murdering the original, because he's the original that would have been murdered on that particular beaming.
It's funny too.
Of course,
none
of the characters start thinking that way. Like how all of a sudden can we have 2 Rikers?
Yeah. Well, going back to what I'm saying about the whole Star Trek versus Star Wars debate about technology, like a lot of people bring that up. It's like, well, the Star Trek has superior teleportation technology. No, they have teleportation technology in Star Wars. Nobody uses it though because it's too dangerous. Like, believe it or not, going back to what I said about the Force, there actually is a Force ability where if you know what you're doing, you can literally teleport yourself across the galaxy, but the Jedi almost never used it, and it's highly discouraging because 99% of the time when you implement it, the typical outcome is going to be you teleport straight into a star and kill yourself.
Well, that's the thing about Star Trek. It's computer controlled, so you can control that. And, in the original series, that's when they started to figure out how to make the calculations precise enough to do intra-ship beaming. Beaming from one location to another in the ship as opposed to the ship down to a planet.
Is the Federation confirmed to use quantum computing?
I don't think they ever said.
Not really related.
The computers vary in all sorts of capabilities anyway.
Those are some pretty high-tech CRTs.
Yeah. Oh, you know what, Daniel? I just figured out a way about how the Star Wars universe could absolutely destroy the Star Trek universe, and it's actually very simple. Find the best Federation ship they have, and sneak IG-88 aboard and install his programming into the ship.
I don't remember them using CRTs on. Maybe in the movies. Okay, yeah, in the first movie they used CRTs. But in the original series, they were all projectors, and I think in Next Gen they were all projectors too.
That's actually one thing that often gets overlooked. And I think this is one area of technology that I think Star Wars is leagues ahead of Star Trek in terms of technology wise, and that's in the field of droids and cybernetics. I mean, because the droids in Star Wars, some of them, their AI is so precise and so well formulated, they almost have a semi level of sapience to them.
Yeah, they start to develop personalities if they don't get regular memory wipes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what Star Trek was always behind on, because even in Next Gen, you just have data and lore, and they're not that advanced AI wise.
That's why I jokingly said, if somehow IG-88 was able to get a hold of the Enterprise and take control of its quantum computer, then goodbye Star Trek universe, because IG-88 was an assassin droid, and its intelligence, it became sapient, and it was so dangerous.
What aren't you? You're describing Nomad.
Or if you want to get even weirder, you have Callisto.
No, you're describing Nomad to a T. They did that back in the original series. They took care of Nomad.
What's Nomad?
Nomad was the merger between the two probes. There was the Earth probe and the alien probe. And the Earth probe was supposed to look for habitable planets, and the alien probe was supposed to clean infestations. And so the merged probe, which was this super powerful thing that could float and use weapons and vaporize whatever it wanted to, thought of itself as machines, and the real life forms as being machines, and the organic components as being infestations. And so it would go by a ship or a planet and just wipe out all the people, wipe out all life forms, all plant and animal life, and just completely sterilize it. It got aboard the Enterprise.
Oh, I think IG-88 could have theoretically done that. The only reason why he didn't was because he wasn't, like you said, he wasn't initially a programming. He was the AI for an assassin droid. But he did have a plan to do that.
This wasn't anywhere near as discriminating as an assassin would be. Because I would imagine an assassin droid would be given a target as they go do that. This was just wiping out all life it ever came across.
Yeah, he was an assassin droid that went rogue. He actually developed sapience, and he basically developed a hatred for all organic life forms, and he had this grand plan to take over the galaxy of the Droid Rebellion. Whether or not it would have worked is up for debate, but he was able to briefly take control of the second Death Star for a little bit.
Personally, I think he was just bitter that he couldn't call them meatbags anymore. Oh, come on.
I'm trying to remember, what was the Next Gen aliens they came across that called human beings ugly bags of mostly water? There was one alien race like that.
Feel sapiens make me laugh.
Let's see if there was anything in the chat. I don't know if I was frozen or not. I think my internet has started behaving now.
I think the chat quit because we're talking about Star Wars and Star Trek, so they must have declared Geek Fest and quit.
We drove them off. That's the thing about these live streams. You never know what we end up talking about.
Yeah, I just kind of lucked into this one. Happening.
Going back to the Borg though, the thing I find funny, basically what you're describing it, I think the Borg would have been much better villains in the original 1960s show, not the Next Gen, because like I said, the Next Gen is trying to be like this perfect socialist utopia, and if anything, it's like, then why are you guys trying to fight the Borg? If anything, you should join them. Because, they're always talking about how it's like, oh no, we're doing this for the betterment of all humankind and other alien races. It's like, well, that's what the Borg are doing. They have a twisted version of what they think about it, but they think, if I recall correctly, the Borg don't see, their assimilation process as oppressive. They're just saying, oh no, we're creating everything into a hive mind so everything can reach its maximum potential.
Which is also the Cybermen thing. They think they're doing you a favor. They're getting rid of pain. They're getting rid of fear. There's no wars among, the cyber kind. everyone's equal.
Yeah.
There's no more hatred, no more differences. Everyone's the same. It's exactly what the socialists say they want.
Yeah, that's why going back to what I was saying, that's why I think they would have been much more appropriate enemies in the original one, because in the original one, like you said, they weren't full-blown socialist post-scarcity. There was still respect for individualism and property and all that, so it would have made much more sense there. And actually, some Star Trek fans have even pointed out one of the reasons why the Federation initially got their butts handed to them by the Borg was because when they first encountered the Borg, even though it was clear right from the get-go that the Borg couldn't be negotiated with, and their ultimate grand scheme was basically to forcefully assimilate, the Milky Way galaxy or destroy it. They still kept having these debates saying, well, we can't wipe out the Borg, that's genocide and all that. And while they were having those debates about what's the appropriate deal to deal with them, the Borg were literally bouncing around, destroying and assimilating star systems. Actually, come to think about it,
I don't remember them ever saying that. There wasn't that much hesitation in dealing with the Borg.
Actually, come to think of it, all that debate about hesitating in the original expanded universe, that's actually one of the reasons why the Yuuzhan Vong, did so well against the New Republic in the early days, is because they kept debating and saying, well, is it really necessary to fight back? These people are just trying to find a galaxy of their own. But the others are pointed out, yeah, but they're enslaving and massacring and destroying planets. They're terraforming planets, causing...
That's what happens when you put a shifty fucking Bothan in charge of the Republic.
Yeah. Yeah, and they kept going, well, they have the right to exist, and they kept having this argument. It's like they're genociding other people, and there were actual, and literally, if I recall correctly, I think it was she used to be an Imperial officer, but then she served in the New Republic, and she flat out told that, you see, if the Empire was still in charge, we would have had them dead the moment they entered our galaxy.
Yeah, no, I'm remembering that. There was never that much debate about the Borg because they first ran into them when Q sent them halfway across the galaxy, and they met them before they were ready to, and they didn't know what was going on. They got back, and remember, Guinan's people had been destroyed by the Borg, and she let Picard know under no uncertain terms, they cannot be negotiated with. There can be no peace with the Borg. So I can't think of any episode where they did anything like what you were talking about.
There actually is one weapon that I think in the original Star Wars Expanded Universe, there was one weapon that I definitely think could have given the Empire an edge. Well, not in the OT trilogy, but later in the Expanded Universe during the Dark Empire saga, which was when Palpatine came back in one of his clone bodies. They actually had one weapon that I think could deal with the Borg. I mean, it would still be a tough shot and would still require a lot of planning, and there would still be a lot of casualties, but I think it could deal with them, and that's the Galaxy Gun. Because the Galaxy Gun, basically, imagine this, Shane, it's a giant gun. It's literally 4 times longer and bigger than an Imperial class Star Destroyer, and it can fire particle disintegrating warheads that are capable of entering light speed, and they can destroy entire planets, and they're particle disintegration weapons.
The problem with the Borg is you only get to use it once. And basically, as soon as you use it, they'll adapt to it. So yeah, you'll wipe out a lot of them. But remember how much of the galaxy the Borg covers.
And once again, Star Trek proves again that it's composed of Mary Sues, because I don't know why. I mean, like, it happens in Star Wars too, but at least, like, there's a limit. I'm seeming to notice in a lot of times with Star Trek, it's always about how it's like, oh yeah, this villain has this technology. Okay, well, I'll just do this. Well, no, you can't, because they have a counter to that.
That's always been the thing with the Borg, is how quickly they adapt. The way you make a weapon capable of defeating the Borg is you make it change enough that you can change. Like, they kept changing the frequencies of the phasers and things like that. And if they could change it quickly enough, the Borg couldn't adapt to it. That's how you fight the Borg.
Probably, I think the one planetary faction that would have had I mean, it still would have been an intense it still would have been an intense battle, which would have resulted in massive casualties. But I think the one organization that was absolutely capable of dealing with the Borg, ironically, was the Clone Wars Republic. And you know why? Because they had the Jedi, and the Jedi have the Force. And I don't think the Borg would be capable of utilizing of copying the Force.
And you say Star Trek is the one with the Mary Sue. Come on, the Force is one big Mary Sue. The thing about the Galaxy Gun is, if there were a way with the Galaxy Gun that you could, I'm not sure what kind of particle you're using, but if you could change either the frequency or the makeup of the particle gun every time you fired it, then yeah, you could take out the Borg with it. But it would have to be that. With the Borg, it's not about making bigger weapons. It's about weapons that are different each time. It's more of a strategy thing.
Okay, so I'm on the Wikipedia page about this is the main weapon fired by the Galaxy Gun. It fired the particle disintegration warhead. The warhead was connected to the missile power core and energized by it as the torpedo neared its target's world. After impacting the circuit of the planet, the warhead triggered a series of nucleic chain reactions that consumed everything in its path, explosively converting matter into energy. And the thing is that I think the problem is that
Borg could deal with that easy, because that's basically a large photon torpedo. Borg could deal with that easy. You're just firing a giant photorp at him. And I mean, like I say, your first shot with a photon torpedo can take out about 1/4 of a Borg cube. You just don't get that second shot. Unless you can modify the next one so that it works a little differently. You know, they got onto the Borg ship with the phasers, and they could take out like 10 or 15 of the Borg before they could adapt to the frequencies, but then they adapted and they were useless. If they can figure out your, frequency hopping scheme, as soon as they do that, you got to come up with something else.
I'm sorry. I'm back. Sorry, I had to get food, but yeah. Okay, the thing I'm going to say this with Shane is that, the reason why the Force is an Mary Sue is because, yes, it can do all this stuff, but it still takes time, and there is a limit in the form of concentration and experience. Me personally, if I was the lead writer and I was to design the Borg, here's the thing. I would still allow them to assimilate, but if the writer said, oh yeah, let's have it so they can instantly assimilate any technology, I'm saying, you're fired, get out of here. That's stupid.
Well, no, it's not. I would make it where it would take time. With the phasers, they could take out like 10 or 15 of them before they adapted. But the point is, if they get it, as long as they can see what your weapon is doing, that's all you get.
Man, I just think the Borg aren't really well written, to be honest. Honestly, yeah, this is going to be controversial, and I know I'm going to piss off a lot of Trekkies. I think the problem is that because Gene Roddenberry wanted to make Star Trek to be such a utopian and like they're perfect in every way, well, they need to have conflict. So what do? Okay, let's introduce an alien race that is like that's 1,000 times more powerful. So they basically have godlike scientific abilities.
No, they had plenty of. They had the Romulans, they had the Cardassians, they had plenty of others that were a threat.
I mean, we have the Cardassians.
Part of me starting to wonder.
The thing about the Borg was to introduce, was to show them that when they start getting to the farther reaches of the galaxy, like out into the Delta Quadrant, that there's so much stuff out there that they're just not ready for. They just were not ready to deal with the Borg. That was the point. They could deal with the Romulans. They made peace with the Klingons. Even the Cardassians, they were able to get under control. Not much control, but... But that's the point. Q was showing them that there were things out there in the galaxy that they just were not ready to face.
So you know what? I'm starting to wonder though. So the Borg are a hive mind, which means they have no individual will of their own. That means while they may be on paper super duper intelligent, they don't have a strong willpower, so therefore they're weak minded. I wonder.
No, they got a strong willpower. They got a bloody strong willpower. You better believe it.
The Vong would probably lose, but the Celestials or the Rakata might have a shot because they have the Force as a wild card to adapt on the fly.
Yeah. Dan, if you're talking about something like Abeloth, she, if the Borg were to ever encounter Abeloth, the Borg would end up serving Abeloth. They would go from being, we're going to create this perfect, we're going to assimilate all known materials in the world and we're going to craft them into that. Abeloth would instantly take over their hive mind, and they would go from being that to, we are the Borg, we serve Abeloth, resistance is futile.
Yeah, that could probably do it if Abeloth is that strong.
Oh yeah, she once literally controlled like billions of beings in a single star system alone. She once had like more than half of the Galactic Alliance, which is the successor to the New Republic, at her command, at her subconscious command.
Okay, yeah, that's the Borg. That she has the Borg now. The Borg are hers. She'd have the Cybermen too, but she wouldn't have the Daleks.
And they
you would not be able to take over the Daleks that way.
And they say Star Wars didn't have strong women until Disney.
Yeah. In case you don't know, Shane, Abeloth, she's basically, she was a human at first, but she basically became an Eldritch deity because what happened was that she was taken in by an ancient group of aliens called the Celestials. They're like a really ancient Force-sensitive group, and they're really powerful. Like, they're so powerful in the Force, they can literally create and destroy things, at a whim, and she was just a mortal woman, but they took her in as one of her family, and she became affectionated with them because she viewed them as her own family. However, two of the Celestials, known as the Son and the Daughter, now the Son represented the dark side of the Force, while the Daughter represented the light side. They were having a sibling spat over which was better, the dark or the light side, so they would have battles, and they would cause massive destruction and kill lots of people. And she wanted to keep them. She wanted them to get along, but but she was just a mortal being. So it's basically what she did was that there were two really powerful things which were known as Force nexuses. These things are incredibly imbued with the Force. There was the fountain of power and the pool of knowledge. One which was strong with the light side and the dark side. She drank from the font of power and bathed in the pool of knowledge, believing that, if I become super powerful in the light and the dark side, I can bring my children under control and restore peace. Instead, she became a raving eldritch deity that became obsessed with dominating and controlling people. And here's the thing: the Celestials weren't able to kill her. Basically, they created the Maw system, which is a cluster of supermassive black holes, basically to contain her.
Here's the interesting question, though. If she took over the Borg, she'd control them, but would they still be able to adapt to technology? I don't know. That might interfere with their greatest strength.
Honestly, from Abeloth's point of view, it wouldn't matter because the thing with Abeloth,
the Borg are still fundamentally technological. You defeat the Borg by defeating their technology. And the strength of their technology is in their adaptiveness. So yeah, she could control them.
Well, the thing with Abeloth is that you can't beat her with technology. That was the whole point, you can only beat her with the Force. It is theorized that there is a weapon called I forgot what it was called. It was some kind of dagger because it's made out of one of the few materials that can kill the ones. Dagger? Yeah, But here's the thing: even Luke wasn't sure if that would actually work on her. Basically, the way they killed her was that Luke actually had to form an alliance with the Sith, and basically they fought her, and they had to basically push her, and basically they successfully pushed her into a bottomless well, basically.
But if that's the case,
Basically,
she'd have no need or interest in taking over the Borg.
She might take over them because
that's the only interest the Borg have is in technology.
I think she would take over them because, she wanted to recreate, what her home planet was before she became, Abeloth, because that woman is still in there and she wants to create that by force. And I think she might see the Borg as a threat to that because they didn't have Borg on her home planet.
I don't know. If she's not at all concerned or threatened about technology, she doesn't need to be concerned or threatened about the Borg.
But going back to what I was saying about the Borg, part of me wonders, what if the Borg came across a Force user that was super powerful and all that, and he successfully used the Jedi mind trick on them? If he was capable of doing that, then basically the Borg would be defeated because all you would have to do. Now, granted, obviously you would have to be superbly powerful in the Force to do it. But if you could Jedi mind trick and basically say you don't want to assimilate technology anymore, you want to undo all the damage you did. Congratulations, you just defeated the Borg because now it would collectively spread throughout all of them instead of individually.
I don't think you're quite understanding the Borg though, because they don't have a mind in that way. In fact, the whole point is that they're individual. Because remember when Picard was turned into Locutus, he had no control over anything. You could have Jedi mind tricked Locutus all you want to. It wouldn't have. They fucking kidnapped Locutus and it didn't make a difference.
Well, then where did the Borg come from then? Well, then where did the Borg come from?
The Borg are a race on the far side of the galaxy that were basically the Cybermen. Human turned themselves into it, and then they started assimilating more of their kind, and it grew from there.
I don't buy it. Well, I mean, I'm not.
I don't buy it. They didn't go into detail with the Borg. With the Cybermen, it started because of the way Mondas was moving through some, treacherous parts of the solar system. It was causing all sorts of disease. They started replacing their organs with artificial organs one by one, and they ended up replacing their entire body. And because of the horror of, what they were becoming and how human they weren't, they put in the emotional inhibitor to turn off all their emotions. And so then they became the Cybermen.
How did that make them feel?
And that's the thing, because they showed in that one episode where they were making Danny Pink into a Cyberman. And, Seb gave him the tablet and said, okay, you just push this button, because he's rock bottom. He's grieving. And, he's got this thing. You push the button. All you have to do is push the button and your emotions are inhibited. And then once you push the button, you would never want to push it and turn it back on. And that cliffhanger is just him hovering over the button, twitching like he's almost doing it and then stopping him. And you got to think, all it would take is one moment of weakness for there to be one Cyberman. And then once there was one Cyberman, unless you stopped him, that Cyberman's going to assimilate other Cybermen and convert them.
And Daniel, earlier you said, the Borg could barely beat the Vong. I think you missed earlier what I said. I think it is established in one episode that there are certain technologies that the Borg cannot assimilate, and one of them was if it's like organic biotech, kind of like Daniel. You've ever played the game Scorn?
Never heard of it.
Oh, it's kind of like that. It's basically where it's technology, but it's not like metallic chemical but it's not like mechanical artificial technology.
Well, I know how Vong Tech works. So.
Yeah. Yeah, basically that the Borg wouldn't be able to assimilate it because it's not, artificial technology. It's naturally, and there was a species within Star Trek called Species 84772, and they were basically like the Yuzon Vong in that they were completely dependent on biotechnology.
See, the Borg are primarily about assimilating technology, and they only assimilate organic life forms secondary to that.
Yeah.
So you give them a
So
life form with some juicy technology in it, they'd probably be all over that.
How does biotech factor in?
How do you mean?
Like, would they want to assimilate biotechnology?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
Any technology,
well,
they're
yeah,
all about. They're all about assimilating it.
Well, yeah, but I was telling you that the point was that the point was that they wanted to assimilate species 8472, but they couldn't. And that's the point I was trying to say. They wanted to, but they couldn't.
Now I'm just thinking of the time Picard was in Star Wars.
You know what, Daniel? Now that I'm reading about it, because I'm looking up where it said that it's talking about the Borg species 8472 war. You know what I'm starting to wonder now? Because the Yuzon Vong, like you mentioned, Daniel, it's mentioned that that the Yuzon Vong and their original home planet, in their original home galaxy, they got involved in a war with a robotic like species that they ended up winning, but it ended up destroying most of the habitable life on their galaxy, which is why they went to the Star Trek galaxy. My own little fan theory: what if that war was with the Borg? The Borg somehow got into their galaxy. They came across the Yuzon Vong, but they couldn't assimilate them. So the Borg took the process of, well, if we can't assimilate them, we got to destroy them.
Not a bad idea.
That doesn't really sound like a Borg. Borg are only really interested in destroying you if you get in the way of assimilating. Remember, the Borg don't hate. The Borg don't, they don't have those kind of thoughts and feelings.
I think that's another reason too why I think the Yuzon Vong would also destroy the Borg, is because the thing about the Yuzon Vong, Shane, is that they hate artificial technology. They view it as a sin because they have a religion system that's kind of like the Aztecs, and that they believe that their gods sacrificed themselves, and so their religion is heavily based on the idea of rebirth, of death and rebirthing, but because machines and artificial technology can't do that, they're viewed as blasphemous. So if the Yuzon Vong were to ever encounter the Borg, basically the Borg's days would be numbered, because they would be declared a holy war on, and the Vong would not stop until the Borg were completely extinct and wiped out the face of the universe.
What would they have that would stop them, though?
Again, their technology is mainly biotechnology, and it is established that the Borg can't absorb biotechnology. In fact, they fought a war with species 8472, and not only did species 8472 defeat the Borg, it actually launched a counterattack and destroyed the Borg and kicked them out of a portion of a galaxy they used to control.
I know, because we see the Borg assimilating biotech. That's what confuses me. They didn't assimilate Data just because they thought he was obsolete.
I thought they didn't assimilate Data because the plot demanded it.
No, they said you will be obsolete. Lokita said you will be obsolete in the New Order.
Again, plot demanded it.
He didn't even try. Didn't even care. Data isn't that advanced an android compared to the Borg.
I mean, what is it, like
Well, let's see.
Data was basically Dr. Soong's side hustle.
How advanced of an android are we talking? Like a Raspberry Pi or?
Actually, our AI, ChatGPT is more advanced than Data if you look at it. Because ChatGPT can use contractions and everything.
Yeah, Daniel, something tells me if C-3PO were to encounter the Borg, he would tell them, "Why, my word, I wish to have a chat with your programmers."
No, the threat would be after they assimilated C-3PO if they took on too much of his personality. Can you imagine the Borg influenced by C-3PO?
Actually, you know what? I mean, it may be a little bit overpowered, but if they could somehow get him aboard, I think R2D2 could defeat the Borg, or at least, destroy a Borg cube.
And now I'm just imagining.
Nah, they'd make mincemeat of him. He's not that powerful.
Now I'm just imagining the Borg assimilating IG-88.
It would turn the Borg into a crazed, self-destructive race, because they would be stuck in between their collective hive mind of trying to assimilate everything, and IG-88 saying, "No, let's kill all non-organic beings." And basically, if the Borg were to assimilate IG-88,
they've assimilated beings like that before. They always suppress that. That's child's play to the Borg.
Okay, if I ever become the head writer of Star Trek, I'm gonna make this announcement. We are gonna rename the Federation the Mary Sue Foundation, and the Borg the Gary Stu Collective.
You can't just write off all the problems by calling them a Mary Sue. The Borg work in an incredibly logical fashion. This isn't stuff that's just because. You're talking about stuff that's just... They suppress instincts like that all the time with every single race.
How? What's the logical processing?
I just said how they did it with Locutus.
You cut out...
Picard had nothing to stop them when they turned him in Locutus.
But how did they suppress that?
They were forcing him to destroy his friends en masse. They were forcing him to command the forces that would destroy the fleet and take it straight to Earth for assimilation. And Picard was helpless to stop it.
And again, that's where, in my personal opinion, that's where the Gary Stu part is coming about, because you're not explaining how they do that. Like, is there like a mechanic or a function? It's just, nope, once they assimilate you, you lose your will. Why? The Jedi mind trick understandable because the Force is an energy field that surrounds all living things, and yeah, if you're in touch with it, you can use it to influence and put the power of suggestion in weak-minded individuals. With the Borg, it's just, you're assimilated, you lost all your free will. Why? Because you have. We're the Borg.
No, it's because that's how the brain works. You don't really have conscious control of your body. All of your control is unconscious, and your conscious just influences it. Cut off that influence, and you can control the rest of the body. To research the people who've had hemispherectomies, who cannot, button a shirt, because one hand buttons a shirt, the other hand goes up unbuttoning it. And they don't want the other hand to unbutton the shirt.
I honestly have half a mind to.
Yeah. You're just not understanding how the brain works.
Note to self: find Thanos's gauntlet and snap Star Trek out of existence, because this is just hurting me.
Look up hemispherectomies. They're real. That actually happens. There are actually people who suffer from that as a result. The brain and the mind are not two separate things. They're different parts of the same system. It's 8 o'clock. That means we need to wind things up.
Okay.
Sounds like something that someone would say to Neo.
All right. Well, thanks for joining. So this is a note for the future. Discussing Star Trek versus Star Wars is even more of a turn off to our viewership than discussing the Civil War. All right, we'll see ya.